Okay, here we are. Hi all. Today, although the course outline details that we're to review elements of research essays, we're instead going to review a whole host of ideas you can adopt as you set out to craft your research essay. And we'll touch on inevitably, on some of the elements of research within this lecture as well. This is a fairly long lecture. We're going to cover a lot of topics that you can use as your approach for your own essay. We'll also go over the requirements of this essay, i.e. The page count, sources, etc. With specific regard to topics, however, you can borrow any of the topics we cover in this lecture today, expand on them, dovetail off them, retract them to a smaller scope, piggyback on them, springboard off of them, or simply choose your own topic for this final essay of our English 252 class. So just remember, we're going to cover a lot of topics that are very urgent and very timely and in the news, and really some really strong flashpoints and buzzwords and buzz language within our contemporary society. So be cognizant of that. You can write your essay on these topics. Um, you could focus down on this topic, or you could expand it, or you could choose your own, which some may choose to do. So let's look at the details for this research essay. As you can see here, the research essay details what's required of you for this final essay within this class. It must be a minimum of 5 pages, double-spaced. Must have a minimum of 4 outside sources. You can expand past databases, but make sure you vet your sources. You can go past the databases, that's fine. You don't have to just stay within the relegated space of the databases on Medicine College's library. But if you do expand outside of those, be sure you vet it yourself. And that has to do with a lot of things on how to vet something. Are there many sources that corroborate that? Are they built within an echo chamber, which is bad? What kind of website are they on? Things of that nature. Does it pass the ear and optic test, right? Do you see lots of advertisements on this website? How's it funded? Those are questions we need to ask when we look at sources. Uh, does it sound audacious and off the top crazy? Does it seem like it's a conspiracy theory? That's a fringe conspiracy theory. Uh, so you must also have a works cited page. We all know that. So that doesn't, and works cited page is not part of your page count or numeration. Uh, so a minimum of 5 pages, double spaced. Then you have to tack on the 6th page, which is the works cited, right? Those works cited entries on your works cited page must correspond to the in-text citations within your body of your essay. You don't have to have a counter argument like we did with the argumentative essay. You can include it if you wish, but it's not mandatory. You must adhere to all MLA, so Modern Language Association, formatting style rules, i.e. Times New Roman fonts, headers, etc. Most of the stuff we already know, right? Because we've done it within the the informative or expository essay. Other details. So this essay, the research essay, is really a combination of expository, which is informative, as we know. It didn't have any dog in the fight because it's just given really strong background information, historical context, and subtext. Um, and it's a combination of that, but also has an argumentative bent to it. You are going to take one side of a debatable topic, and you're combining those two things into one. The scope of this essay is up to you for the research. How far do you want to go? How much do you want to excavate the landscape of this topic? Or do you want to really just crack the surface of the mantle of this topic, but make it a very large swath, right? So think how deep you want to go, how much you want to dig on this topic. So say if you chose a topic, let's see, uh, vaccinations versus non-vaxxers, people who don't want to do vaccination. You take a stance. I believe that non-vaxxers are erroneous in their thought pattern because of X, Y, and Z. That would be your thesis statement, right? Uh, and then you would have to think about your scope. Are you talking about non-vaxxers in Canada? Non-vaxxers, that'd be a large scope. Non-vaxxers in North America, so Mexico, America, and Canada, that'd be a much larger scope, correct? Or do you want to drill down on it and say, I believe that non-vaxxers within Alberta uh, are erroneous in their thought pattern for X, Y, and Z? So always think about scope. And as we mentioned before, you really have to think about and be cognizant of the idea of your vetted sources. Be sure that your sources aren't unfounded or even haphazardly constructed or simply not true. Because the topic is debatable, there will inevitably be two sides, and you can choose to research any side you wish. Just be sure the sources are not based on non-truths or even half-truths. So I tried to compile a lot of topics that are very urgent, that are happening right now in our contemporary times, that are debatable, that exist though, okay? Just that there's different camps with regard to who believe in them and who don't, or who subscribe to them or who don't. And one of them here is false consciousness. And we're just going to look at the definition on the right-hand side with the little graph here, graphic. False consciousness. Social institutions like the mass media play a key role in ensuring that the working class remain happy with their situation despite the inherent unfairness of the system. Karl Marx, the purveyor of communism, described the situation in which members of the subordinate classes cannot see that they are being duped as false consciousness. So false consciousness, we believe we know what's going on, but really there's a veil that's separating us from the truth, and we just don't know it exists. So we believe that we are aware or conscious of the facts of the world. In Marxist terms, ideology can ultimately be identified as the lies, deceptions, and misinformation given to the working class, what he calls the proletariat, in order to maintain the state of false consciousness. So examples on the left-hand side of false consciousness: people obeying social leaders in the belief that they represent God. Working class people believe that certain politicians and policies will benefit the working class when they actually represent and benefit the ruling elite. Believing that capitalism is a democracy that promotes political freedom, and believing that society is constructed by autonomous individuals freely negotiate amongst themselves, devoid, and this is key, devoid of power differences and social conditioning. They exist all around us. These examples here are so rife within America right now. The idea of we believe we know what's going on, right? But really, there's individuals pulling strings, spinning cranks, behind the scenes, crafting lies, us believing them, but it's really doesn't benefit us at all to believe those falsities. So another hot topic and even a flashpoint today in our time, in our society, is Black Lives Matter. I think this would be a great essay. So if you were to write an essay on Black Lives Matter, you would talk about what it is, define it, how is it emerged? What what was the catalyst for it to emerge in our society now, right? Whether that includes or incorporates, as I listed here, race relations, police overreach, right? You got the George Floyd murder, the police officer kneeling on his neck despite him telling him that he can't breathe and he felt like he was dying, and then fostering a police state. More and more, we're getting the clash between Black Lives Matter protesters and then anti-protesters. So you really have to give some background information, some context as to why it exists, and then show us how it exists and how it emerged. How did it actually emerge? Go on a limb and do supposition as to why you think it emerged, and then reach out to the databases, and reach out to the newspapers, and reach out to articles and journals to corroborate what you believe, how it existed and how it came about. Really timely, really important topic. All right, this is a big topic in the United States, and it is in Canada, especially in Alberta, right? Because Alberta seems to be more conservative, more driven towards capitalism, not socialism. But really, Canada, I remember when I first moved to Canada from the United States, I looked up, sort of Canada's ideology, its belief, and one of the first things I saw was Canada, to some degree, is a social state. It has some social welfare, such as, and that's not a bad thing, such as universal health care, right? So if one were to write an essay on the differences between these two things, you'd research it. You're going to have to jump on one side of the fence or the other. You just can't compare and contrast. That would be an expository essay, but you have to combine expository, as I said before, with argumentative. You might say there are comparisons and contrasts, as we can see here, that are listed here, but also one may be better than the other. And I use the word better. That's an imprecise word, right? So always go for precision with your verbs. Is more beneficial. I don't know. Is maybe is a better word than better. But you would maybe start out with giving us a history of capitalism, giving us a history of socialism, give us a history of Canada or whatever country you want to sort of drill down on. And then again, think about your scope. And then jump on one side of the argument, this debatable argument of capitalism versus socialism. What would be the benefit of Canada being strictly capitalistic, letting everybody fend for themselves, there being no state or provincial intervention or federal intervention with regard to medical treatment, right? We know it's free. I can go in tomorrow, get a heart transplant if I wanted to, right? Even if I didn't need it, and it wouldn't cost me a dime, right? So think about the benefits of being able to get free Medicare and free medical coverage, and versus what would happen if we weren't. that. It didn't have that free social mechanism of socialism in Canada and other countries as well. You could sort of reinforce your idea by talking about other countries. They have even a greater level of socialism and what the implications of that are, right? Like, say, France and England and Sweden, right? Most of Europe have some level of socialism. That is to say, you have free medical, you have free dental, you have free prescription drugs. We don't have those two last things in Canada. Would that be beneficial for us to have a greater degree of socialism? That is to say, adding on to free medical care by having free pharmaceuticals like prescription drugs and free dental care. It only makes a healthier person. So it seems the answer seems apparent. So think about those things as you're crafting your own research essay. Okay, so ever since the pandemic hit, especially here in Canada, this has been a real flashpoint, a real hot topic. The idea of universal income. And so what had taken place was, as the lockdown was transpiring in Canada, across the world, but in Canada, if we just focus on our scope here in this country, individuals could not go to work. So their income had to be augmented with the CERB, right? The Canadian Emergency uh, Bill for that weekend. Receive a paycheck if you're out of work. It was more money than the unemployment insurance, so it was able to augment and add on to, and in some cases, be their sole income. So the question is, what do Canadians think about basic income? Should it be in place? Should this CERB that was enacted for the pandemic, should that be something that's in place forever? Everybody in Canada will receive a monthly paycheck, despite their economic status, um, and despite if they're working or not, their employment status, but they will receive this basic universal income, which will allow a couple of things to take place. One, it'll make the economy more robust, as people will feed into the economy by spending money on consumer products, but it'll also ensure quality of life. So think about the universal income as a topic. I sort of crafted the argument right there that uh, that Canada and most countries think that it is a good idea and that we should do it, implement it in Canada. But I don't want you to necessarily, if you could make it a counter argument to that and carry it the breadth of a 5-page research essay, then go for it. If you don't believe basic income is a necessity within Canada. Some might say, well, that's creating a greater a socialist state, within Canada. And then you'd have to argue, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? Um, we know in pop culture, or in some, especially among conservatives in America and right wingers in America, they believe, a social state is bad, right? But again, we already know that Canada has some level of a social state because of the universal health care, and what would it be even worse to layer on these other things, such as free dental and free prescription and free or universal basic income? Some big questions. Think about it. So another timely topic, and even Flashpoint. So as you can see, I'm saying Flashpoint, and what I'm really getting at is it's highly debatable. As we went into the pandemic, people were so resistant towards it for whatever reasons. This created public outcry and mass protests of individuals that didn't want their freedoms sort of taken away. So COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it disparaging? Is it promising? As you can see, the prevalence rates for mental health here outcomes among university students during France's COVID-19 lockdown. So you can see the various rates of suicide thoughts, stresses, perceived stress, depression, levels of anxiety. So if you were to choose this topic, it wouldn't be enough just to offer these numbers of France, right? You have to somehow come up with two other things, and that would be, what are the numbers here in Canada, and how are those two relatable, and what were the numbers pre-pandemic, so we can compare and contrast. And then you have to jump in on one side of the debate. Do you agree with this uh, lockdown, or you disagree with it? As you can see here, supervised consumption sites, hot topic as well. This is a picture of one in Canada, a consumption room. So, but it's also a hot topic in Medicine Hat, a smaller town, right? Uh, so, are supervised consumption sites, are they good? Are they bad? Are they ugly? Uh, you would have to look at, not in my backyard, sort of the argument versus the urgency that's needed because they save lives. These these sites. That you would have to look at those two arguments, and you jump on one side, and then you answer for us. You build the argument for us that yes, these are good, or yes, these are bad, and this is why. Right? It's a hot topic. It's one that individuals, I think, older people who own property fall in the not in my backyard, and younger people who know people who are addicted to drugs uh, and know that these are proven places that are able to offer social workers and nurses in order to help these individuals meet them where they're doing the drugs in order to get them off those drugs. So it's highly debatable. So think about if you want to use this topic, what do you think? And then go research it. Okay, this is sort of a fun one, but you can't let it get out of hand. The idea of obliterating or confirming conspiracy theories. So it's fringe conspiracy theories, which are part of life, right? Some of them are true. They're just not widespread popular, right? In terms of people who believe in them, versus fact-based. So a lot of conspiracy theories, they start out as maybe facts, some iteration, some tiny iota and crumb of fact that gets exploded out into sort of a slippery slope fallacy, logical fallacy. So, for example, um, most notably, QAnon in America is a sort of conspiracy theory where people actually believe that America is run by a cabal of pedophiles and Satan worshipers who run a global child trafficking operation, and that President Trump is the only person that can stop them. The information supposedly comes from a high-ranking government official who posts cryptic clues on 4chan and even the more unfettered site 8chan under the name Q. This could, though, that idea of QAnon and the conspiracy theory of QAnon would definitely be categorized as a fringe conspiracy theory, right? If you were to write on sort of confirming these conspiracy theories, or sorry, obliterating them, especially QAnon, because it's an unstable one, right? And it's being bought into by a pretty um, specific part of society in America, at least, the people that are for Trump, right? Hence the part of the conspiracy theory where only Trump is the one that can save them from these things, right? And then there's a sort of salacious, over-the-top hyperbole to this conspiracy theory, right? I mean, no one who hears this, I hope, who's logical or educated in some way, would actually believe it. Um, and then there's the fact-based part of it. Yes, there is child trafficking that does take place, but to think that it's this cabal of pedophiles and Satan worshipers who are running this global operation, and only one person in the world could save them from it, is the part of the conspiracy theory that is fringe. So you might want to take on the idea of obliterating. I think it'd be interesting to obliterate some conspiracy theories and use and corroborate it by doing research and finding individuals that are um, highly authoritative on this subject matter, not people living in their basements who just decry nonsense when it comes to these topics. So just think about that. So hate groups, white supremacy, and militia. We're seeing this more and more within America, within the crossroads of Black Lives Matter in a lot of ways, who are protesters. Then you have anti-protesters coming out, such as we have here. And the Black Lives Matter, it did result in some looting, which is, I think, one of the impetuses for these individuals coming out, the hate groups and militia. Militia to protect, but they're still a fringe part of society, as is white supremacy. Maybe not as fringe, right? But certainly part of that sort of fringe, that anxiety-filled fringe that they just feel that they're not in control. Their society is not in control, so they have to go out there and protect it. All right, so what used to be a small number of the population has gained ground with regard to sheer numbers lately in America for white supremacists and militia. So they used to be, as we can see here with this short blurb, the lingering effects of Trump's candidacy enabled the alt-right, so the ultra-right, to emerge from its origins in cyberspace and step into the real world with significant real world consequences in places like Charlottesville. So if you remember Charlottesville, a white supremacist, a self-proclaimed one, he's in prison now for the rest of his life, drove his car into a crowd of people, people were protesting, and sort of a lot of white supremacists showed up, and in an anti-protest gesture, a transgressive physical gesture, he drove his car into a crowd and killed a few people. So how did this even take place? Where we used to not have, people surely have been white supremacists and bigoted throughout history. It's just a universal part of being human that it emerges. But then one quickly has to get past it. But yet these people have found sort of a home on the internet. I think that's part of the problem, how it is able to emerge. They used to live under rocks, but now they're part of our daily lives in America. What are the consequences of having fringe groups like these, white supremacists and militia, present at protesting events? It would be an interesting topic to research for sure, because it is something that's very relevant to here and now. So this is an interesting graph. Media, so political bias, we know that they exist. So this sort of gives you a visual map of where they exist. Which ones are the fringe? Which ones are the extreme? Which ones are the more uh, distal with regard to their belief system and their ideology and perpetuating falsehoods? And which one are or just reporting on anything and not necessarily doing a great amount of research, and which ones are sort of in the medium, the medium sort of level of information they're imparting. So you can see the really good ones, what we could sort of categorize as bona fide news agencies towards the top. So original fact reporting, complex analysis, then got analysis. Then we start to get towards the middle, opinion, fair persuasion. So they're starting to persuade at this point. They're not expository, just right as we see at the top, NPR, BBC, who are strictly just reporting, just the facts, right? And then I never really thought of I knew MSNBC, which is in the middle, was sort of trying to persuade. I never really thought of CNN as that. Um, so if I were to write an essay on this, I might defend CNN and say, in fact, they are closer to being more fact reporting and unbiased. They do give opinion, so that's probably part of the reason they're in the middle. But NPR, it's never opinion. It's always straight information. Reuters, Bloomberg, straight information, time, just the facts. Then we get to down to the very bottom. All right, you get the contains inaccurate fabrications. That's detrimental and damaging to public discourse. All right, you get Fox News right here. So they give information that's detrimental, right? Um, Almost yellow journalism, which is sensationalizing the facts and not really just presenting the facts. So, and you can see they even compare and contrast these two at the very bottom. So the left side would be liberal news outlets, comparing it to the right side, because it's conservative. So think about if you wanted to write an article, or sorry, an essay on this topic. The idea that yes, media have political bents and are therefore biased, and these are the ones that are biased, and this is the way they're able to get away with it. This is the history of it, the background information, and these are the people that subscribe either to the ones that report good, bona fide, well-reported news without any sort of bias, and these are the individuals that subscribe to the ones that they cloud over or obscure the truth. So you could even think about crafting your essay around the idea of fake news. You know, there's fake news has been a topic that's been lauded as by some as not real, and others, namely the president, as being universally true. That all news agencies, or for the most part, are fake news. Well, that's simply not the case, and then you would tell us how this is either true or not true. It seems like it is true, and just me doing research on it. Um, so I love these graphics that we're seeing here. So the one in the middle with the camera, just fairly, I would say, true. The idea of anything that's mediated has the option of being interpreted different by different individuals and different groups and different ideology, right? So anything that's mediated, and everything almost is mediated, right? As you listen to my voice on this lecture, I'm mediated, right? And I'm mediating you. Therefore, my message can be manipulated. I can manipulate my message here through editing, through photoshopping, and send a different message than what necessarily is the truth. So fake news, you can see the image here. A guy is running from an individual with a knife, but the camera shows by mediating, by editing the image, uh, choosing to focus on a certain aspect of the image, it's quite the opposite, that the individual running is the person who's wielding the knife. I love this. This is fake news. The one with Obama. Obama Foundation owns 82% of mail-in ballot printers. So this was something that floated across social media and media in general. Not great media outlets. They would have been considered on the last slide as fake or deplorable in their reporting of facts. But you could manipulate anything nowadays with social media because there's so many voices um, that can take place, and there's such connectiveness through social media that one can release a graphic with a statement as we see here, a headline, and one could take it as fact if they don't do the research. And one way to do your research is by using this website, or I think Google has the same thing. It's called reverse image search. So I can drop in the URL of where this image of Obama exists, and it will verify for me in a number of ways if this is true or not true, and it'll give me the original source where it came from, which will help me and you decide if it's real or not real. So if one were to write an essay on fake news, they would say the history of it, where it came from, where it hit its highest point. I would say now. Uh, why does it exist? How is it able to exist now and maybe didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago? So you would really explore those ideas within the essay if you choose this topic of fake news and how it exists or doesn't exist. All right, here's a fun one, something that we've all sort of went down the rabbit hole with on our phones before, watching videos of the Karen effect, the mythology of Karen. So how exactly did this self-righteous, self-serving, white privileged Karen emerge in pop culture today? I mean, there's a plethora, an innumerable amount of videos emerging every day. So what was the perfect conditions for it to emerge, say in the last year, for the Karens that we see a greater number of Karen videos taking place on social media? What was it? What was the crossroads that had to come together, the circumstances that had to cross paths in order for the Karen to emerge? Um, or maybe, just maybe, Karens aren't as real or even pervasive as social media has portrayed them. Maybe it is an effect perpetuated by social media. Not purposely, but maybe it happened, I don't know, organically. That now that we have the ability to film more on our phones and post things more to social media, edit more through our phones, that we're able, and then the algorithm of Facebook reinforcing itself to create an echo chamber, which we'll get to in a few minutes. That the more videos we watch of Karen, the more Karen videos we'll get. Therefore, we think there are more Karens out there, right? So just think about that. If you were to choose as a topic, the phenomenon of Karen, the Karen effect, how it is or isn't a thing in our society. Indigenous reparations, fulfilling our obligations to tribal nations and indigenous peoples. This has been for the past, I would definitely say within the Trudeau prime minister era, has been an important subject matter. So the question whereby we're repaying money to the tune of billions to indigenous people, their families, if they're not alive anymore, who are taken off to these residential schools, right, separated from their family, in order to greater act or to greater absorb them into Canadian culture, right, white Canadian culture. But then the question arises, is paying for years of wrongful treatment towards Indigenous peoples an effective way to highlight past grievances? Is throwing money at a problem the way of fixing the problem, right? Surely there's some contemporary problems that the government is perpetuating towards Indigenous people, i.e. being on reservations, right? Relegating themselves to reservations, unemployment around reservation life. Um, then the argument would be against that would be, of course, the counter argument would be, well, they don't have to live on those reservations. Yeah, of course they don't. But the idea that reservations even exist might be an issue. I know the argument will arise, well, this is their land. Maybe we should live on the reservations as the white power structure who perpetuate the master narrative of whiteness. Well, one can make that argument, but it's hard to unwind that sort of that to unwind that thing, to put the genie back in the bottle, right? To put the toothpaste, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube, right? Because due to to unwind colonization, right, that had taken place all across the world, really. It's a shame that we even did it, but and we're actually going to touch upon that in a moment when we talk about uh, the destruction of historical figures, the statues of historical figures, is a very popular contemporary transgressive, maybe transgressive good, maybe transgressive bad. That would be up to you to jump on one side of that argument, a highly debatable argument, and then and give us historical context and contemporary context. But is throwing money at a problem really the right thing to do, or is there other ways to sort of to provide reparations to these indigenous individuals? Okay, social media, banning or censoring. So we could see here that Twitter is starting, and also other social media outlets such as Facebook are starting to censor or even omit posts that they think are driven by ideology, meaning they're unfounded, it's dogma. It's a group of people, a smaller group of people who believe in this and are perpetuating this. And a lot of times it's hyperbole. It's not true. It's exaggerated. So you can see here at the very top, one of Donald Trump's tweets that got branded or labeled by Twitter as suspect, maybe untrue. There's no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mail boxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged and even illegally printed out and fundamentally signed. Fraudulently signed. So it's perpetuating a lot of falsities, and you could see it. This is part of the eye test, the optic test of when you find your sources and your information, right? If you were trying to include this as bona fide, legitimate information within your essay, one can look at it and say, mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed, and there will be no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Well, how is that possible? They'll be fraudulent, right? What if Donald Trump wins? Is he going to say they're fraudulent then? So you can see the argument starts to fall apart. Uh, so this does take place. We could see here many examples. If you were to write an essay on this, you would say, is it a good thing for online censoring whereby public figures' words, such as Trump's here, are labeled in order to warn the public of possible errors and even hyperbole and falsities even? It's a very urgent and timely topic because it's taking place across the digital world now in social media, now that Facebook and Twitter have gotten on board with censoring things that, because really you become your own media outlet, right? Trump is his own media outlet made available through Twitter, right? Posting to Twitter, and then people retweeting it, right? And it's even more pervasive than the way, say, the local media can reach. Its reach is much farther on social media, on Twitter, right? As it gets retweeted. And so it's easy for someone to read this and it wasn't labeled, that we would say, wow, okay, I believe that. My vote doesn't count. I'm not going to vote at all then. And then the whole structure of democracy starts to crumble when people get to that cynical level of not voting, right? Believing that it doesn't exist and it's not real, and what is truth and what is lies. So it would be interesting to see an essay on sort of speaking on the topic of social media banning, giving us examples, giving us context and history and background, telling us exactly what it is, define it, where does it take place, and why. Okay, I sort of touched on this subject matter before. So Facebook algorithm, echo chamber effect. Uh, Facebook has come out and reported that you create your own algorithm. The more things you click on, we use the Karen video, for example. So I watch a Karen video. I watch maybe two. So the algorithm of Facebook is built to change to appease me, to create an echo chamber of what I like to see and what I like to hear, right? So say I click on, and so it's going to give me more of Karen videos, and you can see this really starting to become a problem because one, I hear only what I want to hear now, right? So I'm not tolerant of other people's beliefs and belief systems if all I hear is my own, right? And then you start to find friends who are attracted to these algorithms as well, right? Who start to build this repertoire of just watching the same type of video, listening to the same type of rhetoric, and listening to the same type of speech talking. And then they find a home together and they become sort of zealots or extreme, right? And don't are honestly zealots and extreme and bigoted because they won't allow any other person's opinion to enter the conversation, right? Whether it's left or right or middle. I watch one white supremacist video because I'm doing research on white supremacy. And I go out and watch another one because I'm still doing further research. And now my algorithm starts getting full of these things, right? And then maybe a fissure starts to happen within my own belief system. And wow, well, maybe they do have a right sort of ideology. Maybe they are on the correct side of the law and correct side of humanity to hate and be bigoted against a complete populace of people based on their color, right? So you can see how that could be really extreme. That could really be a slippery slope that one slides down very quickly. All right, if one were to write an essay on this, does this phenomenon exist, the idea of Facebook algorithm? The answer is yes. Uh, and if so, and it does, what are the detrimental effects of hearing your own words, beliefs, ideology, passions, compulsions, desires, needs, ideas, and ideals blasted back at you, not on a daily basis, but on a minute-to-minute basis? What are those implications? Okay, we sort of touched upon this before, and it goes with the sort of the Twitter and Facebook censorship. So our national monuments coming down, is that censoring? Is that censorship on a public scale? Are we doing harm? Are we doing good even by removing statues of historical figures? We see a couple of them here. The one on the far right is Christopher Columbus, right? So we're not wanting to celebrate these individuals because of the idea of colonization, right? And colonization always results in things that are bad. We leave a people that aren't ruling themselves, which is bad. We destroy that culture by amalgamating into our own as the master culture. So they get destroyed both in language and their cultural heritage. But is this not a type of censorship by removing these statues? Or is it setting the history straight by not glorifying historical figures who committed bad deeds. I'd have to do some research. I've never read a student essay on it, but was Christopher Columbus intentionally committing bad deeds? It could be debatable. Were other individuals that were fighting for generals of the Confederacy in America, or were they committing bad deeds by being generals of armies? It could be debatable because they were fighting for a nation based on one premise, and that was perpetuating slavery. So it could be debatable. So we have to think about those things if we really want to choose this hot topic flashpoint for our essay topics. This has become a popular topic in say the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years. So as Silicon Valley, most um, media-based, technology-based companies, the big ones especially, Google, Twitter, uh, many others, are based, Microsoft, are based in Silicon Valley, California, right? Uh, in creating technology, there's a phenomenon. You'd have to, if you were to write on this, this is the background information you have to give. In creating greater technology, you're replacing jobs. You're taking jobs away from humans, right? The more AI we create, artificial intelligence, the more jobs are going to be eliminated from the human populace manning these jobs, actually physically doing these jobs. So the question then arises, should Silicon Valley, with companies that we see here like Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, should they pay a tax to replace the jobs their technologies have eliminated? So this is a simple example, but it's an important one. The idea of Amazon, right? So they're by by you able to order anything from Amazon, nearly anything, you're eliminating storefronts that would otherwise, these brick and mortar storefronts that otherwise sell these products, right? Because it's not like Amazon is reaching out to a small business saying, hey, an individual in Medicine Hat wants to buy, I don't know, wants to buy a book. We don't have it. You have it on your shelves. We see. Can you send it to us and we'll give you a profit, a cut of the profit? It doesn't happen. They have vendors they go to, yes, and they don't have everything under their own roof. I get that. Amazon doesn't. They do have to reach out to vendors, but they bully those vendors a lot of times into selling cheap so that they can keep them on as a vendor. Uh, so and think about too, like they're starting to go to drones, right? I'd say in the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of drones flying around, especially in America. Um, so what does that replace? Does that replace the jobs of individuals that were drivers for these products, where the drones are delivering Amazon packages to your front door? Is that eliminating jobs? So the idea has arisen of companies that are multi-billion dollar, hundreds of billion dollars, and trillions of dollars profit, how they should pay a tax to make up for the idea of losing jobs that they are perpetuating to be lost. Very popular because of the pandemic. This topic, essential critical infrastructure workers, as you can see here. Nurses, police officers, one could even make the argument for people that work at restaurants if they're open. Anywhere where people come into contact with people on a mass scale on a daily basis. Should these individuals, these so-called frontline workers, receive hazard pay? While the rest of us are on lockdown at home and we're still utilizing these services, should these individuals that are higher risk of contracting COVID-19 or any other condition that's part of the pandemic, should they be reimbursed a greater level of funding than we get? So that would be maybe the question, the central question at the heart of your argument. Should they? You do the research, you figure out that yes, they do, or no, they don't, and this is why. Give background information. Surely you mentioned the pandemic. You have to define what a frontline worker is. One could even write an essay on if frontline workers, the definition of it, and if it expands into waters that are uncharted that they shouldn't be labeled as, maybe labeled as frontline workers, right? Is a taxi driver a frontline worker? An Uber driver? I don't know. Fast food people, frontline workers, or are we just saying the medical community? They're the frontline workers because we know they're being exposed to COVID-19 because those individuals are coming in to be treated for COVID-19. So some interesting things to think about, very contemporary. So if one were to write this essay, it would be a very timely and urgent one. This has been around for a long time, this idea that the representation of body image in media, social media or otherwise, is that good or bad? Is the idea that an individual can be photographed, a celebrity most likely of some sort, placed on a magazine that's ubiquitous, such as In Touch Weekly here, that's placed right in front of us as we go through the grocery line every day, right? So it's not like we can avoid it if we go grocery shopping. That's why they put the candy at the checkout line too, right? So you're going to be definitely going to be exposed to it um, when you check out. Um, is there some wrongdoing taking place when you could take a photograph of a celebrity and then it could be airbrushed and photoshopped and all those things, right? That individuals have come out lately, say in the past couple years, and said, "Hey, that wasn't me. They actually airbrushed me or they photoshopped me for the cover, so don't believe it," right? And then there was the whole movement not to wear makeup. Individuals not wearing makeup. Alicia Keys comes to mind, where she stopped wearing makeup because of how the image that it projects. I'm sure there's some other things woven into that, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The idea of animal testing, how makeup companies test on animals to make sure that allergies and that it lasts long, that it's able to resist, say, water and things of that nature. So one would have to jump on one side of the argument that no, it's okay for them to Photoshop. We as a populace know that they're Photoshopping them. Nobody can be built like that. Or is it setting up, or you would say no, this is setting up unrealistic sort of goals for individuals when we see Hugh Jackman being all jacked up right here and looking like a beefcake. You know, you're setting up unrealistic goals, especially if you start to think about, oh gosh, he's in his 50s. I can't believe he looks that way when he's 50. Um, I'm trying to think what movie it was. Baywatch, the movie. Zac Efron, he got all jacked up on steroids. There's just no other explanation for it, for him looking like that. If you look at his past image from a High School Musical, I think he was in, and when he was just a skinny kid. I get as people get older, if they lift weights, they're gonna get bigger, especially in an age range, right? But to get that jacked up in that short amount of time, right? So he's really setting an unprecedented, unrealistic goal for individuals that would sort of look to him for guidance on image, right? And be like, wow, I just no other way I could be that big unless I go on steroids. So these are really topics that we need to think about. They're urgent. They have a lot to do with body image and the images of ourselves and our confidence and how we carry ourselves, and therefore are debatable and should be talked about in the essay form. All right, big topic nowadays that's emerging in both Canada and America. Um, you see it all the time. Uh, so should wearing a mask be mandated at the federal level in order to flatten the curve of COVID-19? Or is that perceived as un-American or un-Canadian? The idea, oh, you're taking away my rights. If you force me to wear a mask, you force me to do anything, you're taking away my rights. As an individual, I'm an individual. That's a, that's a fairly, with regard to the giant hourglass of time of all of existence of humans, that's a fairly recent phenomenon, the idea of the individual. For most of history, most of those grain of sands within an hourglass, if you were to remove them, it would show you that the majority of those grains, we existed as a whole, as a community, that we had to work together, that nobody was better than anybody else, everybody had to work together. And this is true all the way until, say, probably the last 40 years, 40, 50 years, that the individual has sort of emerged out of that mass of people. I'm thinking back to people during World War II having to use um, trading stamps, right? You're only given a certain amount to go to the grocery store because you had to cut back so they can send that product, whatever that was, food, clothing, anything, to the troops overseas, right? So they were thinking about the whole and not the individual. People created what were called victory gardens. Instead of going to the grocery store, they grew their produce in their backyard. They were thinking about the whole, not the individual, which allowed the grocery store food to go to overseas to the men fighting on the front lines. So it's been a very recent phenomenon with regard to the expanse of history for the individual to emerge over the group of the culture. Think about selfies, right? Having a group picture versus a selfie, right? So it's very individualistic driven today, the idea of the self of the individual. So think about that. That might be a correlation that sort of connects to the mask mandate and how there's a lot of pushback. And is that pushback fruitful? Is it un-American or un-Canadian? Is it good or bad? These are topics that are urgent and need to be written about. This is something that has come up, and it seems unfair, and I'm not sure if it's a real mandate. I'll leave the onus on you to do the research. But francophone or not, does a prime minister have to, is it mandatory for he or she to be a francophone? Meaning, does he or she have to be able to speak bilingual? Do they have to speak French, right? Trudeau does, his father did. I think, who was the last prime minister? It was before my time in Canada. Harper, I think. He was bilingual. And there's been an argument made that, well, that's leaving out a whole swath of the population who can otherwise be a great prime minister and rise to the ranks of being a prime minister and do a fantastic job of unification, both domestically and overseas, and make Canada better for whatever way that's possible, right? Both the abstract way and the objective way. Um, so that's on the surface of that argument, it seems unfair that the individual has to be a francophone, right? That means everybody in Alberta can never, ever, ever, ever be a prime minister because maybe you only receive 1 or 2 years of French um, in high school, and then that's not enough to reinforce it, right? It's really about immersing yourself. So just the tweet here says candidates for prime minister need to speak French just like candidates for president need to release their tax returns. That's sort of a mixed sort of argument there, right? I can see what do tax returns have to do with speaking a second language, being bilingual. Um, I'm not 100% sure that individuals making a strong connection there. What they want to say, and it doesn't sound right to the ear, they want to say this: candidates for prime minister need to speak French just like candidates for president need to speak English, right? Which is a weird comparison. Uh, do you have to speak French to be prime minister? Does this next conservative leader need to be bilingual? So most of the candidates conservative leadership candidates struggle through the French portions of the bilingual debate. Does it matter? Well, if Canada wasn't a self-professed bilingual country, no, it wouldn't matter. But we are a self-professed bilingual country. So seemingly it does matter with the largest population of French-speaking people outside of Paris in Quebec, right? So maybe it does matter. Uh, one would have to jump on one side of the argument or the other and report on it by doing research. Okay, I have a couple more topics. Um, and then we'll be done for the day. So here we go. There are more than two genders. This has been a really hot topic, especially since uh, Jordan Peterson, right, the psychology professor and philosopher and educator, came out saying that, and it got misinterpreted a lot of different ways and became very convoluted and complex at some point. But he came out saying that no, an individual, I'm not. What it came out uh, pop culture came out and sort of twisted it in a way, his words. They said that, oh, he's saying that there aren't any other genders, that there's only two. There's a binary of male and female. Um, but he came out saying that there are two sexes at birth when you're born. There, you have either male genitalia or female genitalia. As you get older, maybe it becomes more complex. Yes or no, I don't know. But what he was saying was, I'm not going to be mandated, there was a mandate floating through Ottawa that it was part of another bill that you have to be able to use any pronoun that someone says they are. And he says, I'm not going to be told what I can say and not say, right? Because is a level of free speech, and that's exactly what that mandate was saying. Jordan Peterson. So how many genders are there? What are the legal ramifications for more than two genders? What are the legal ramifications for only having two genders, right? That are part of sort of the legal mandate in society, right? How does one categorize or define their gender? It's so interesting. It's the island of Fiji and the islands that surround Fiji in the South Pacific. They have a phenomenon where there aren't enough females being born through natural childbirth, right? Being born. Then they designate a male. They call it the whakalata, meaning fake lady, and they raise that person as a woman, as a girl, and then a woman. And she fills in the gap of not having enough female in society. And he will be raised as a woman, for all intents and purposes, will be a woman, even though they might be attracted to women, being a man, with male genitalia and male urges. But they do what's considered the daily duties of a woman: housework, cooking, cleaning, things of that nature. So gender is really an interesting thing, and that was something that organically came up in their society. It wasn't like it was some mythology and they adopted it, right? And then here we go. How does one categorize or define their gender? Interesting topic, hotly debated, uh, perfect for this research essay. Okay, sort of building on that idea of gender is the idea of gender wage equality, as we see here. Are we paid the same as male and female? Are male and female paid the same? And then as we get to stratification of gender, as we saw in the last slide, or slide for me because it's a PowerPoint, but last few minutes for you, does the stratification of gender create even greater complexities With regard to pay, now that we have an individual that might identify themselves as both female and male, the quest to answer these questions are endless and arduous even, right? So are we paid the same? If so, in what industries? What's the implications of wage inequality? What does that mean if there's wage inequality? What are the implications of that? Are there greater implications that will unfold because of inequality within wage with regard to gender? And what are the implications of wage equality? If we make everybody equal, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? And why? So interesting topic, one that's being debated as we speak. Okay, here's one that'll sort of tug at the old heartstrings, using pathos as a driving force. Remember the illogical, or sorry, the three appeals, argumentative appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos. And this is definitely pathos. The idea of the idea of testing on animals, number one. But when is animal testing permissible? Surely one can make an argument that it is permissible, right? If I'm about to cure cancer, if I kill these, 600 bunnies by doing laboratory tests on them for cancer, surely the end is justified by the means would be one argument. I'm not guiding you in any one direction or another. Then someone can jump on the other side of that. The idea, well, you're still taking a life to replace another life. Is a human life more valuable than 600 bunnies? Right? So it is complicated. The debate between those two diametrically opposed ideas, it's complicated. So if you were to jump on board on either side, do your research and make a strong argument. I think it's a good topic. I think all these topics that we went over today are really robust. So there's enough information out there for them. Very urgent. It's taking place right now in our contemporary society. Every minute, every day, people are involved with these decision-making processes of perpetuating either these things are good or bad, or they do exist or don't exist. Are they a phenomenon? Are they real? Why? Think about the background information in your research. Think about having vetted sources in your research. Think about what that boils down to. Vetting your research. It's both. It has to pass the optic test, the sonic test of hearing it, the optic test of seeing it. Look at the website itself. Is it bona fide? Does it have a sort of dog in the fight? Is it trying to sort of guide you towards or persuade you or argument on behalf of one side? Or offering both sides, giving you objective truth. Think about truth. What is truth? Does it exist? How can I find it? And start to really think about, as we move forward, the topic that you want to choose for your research essay. Okay, we covered a lot of information today, a lot of different topics, some of them related, some of them not related at all, some on opposite sides of the spectrum. I try to present both sides of the argument so you could choose one. Feel free of any of these topics. I think there were 26 of them. Feel free to choose one that you're going to write on for your own research essay, or use it as a jumping off point to go find your own argument. Maybe it was sort of this was help you brainstorm the topic that you want for your research essay. So that's fine as well. You don't have to choose any of the topics that I chose for this lecture. That's completely up to you. But these are highly, highly worthy, these 26 topics. In scouring and doing your research on the internet, and talking to friends and neighbors and listening to news and thinking about my own existence, right? These are the topics that matter. And there are many more, but it's hard to pack them all into one lecture that you feel as if a student's going to listen to, right? But there are more out there. They're just as worthy topics that exist out there that are debatable, that one can write a research essay on. So please, as always, email me if you have any questions or concerns or areas of clarification that you need. Any questions? If not, thank you for listening. Start to think about what you want your topic to be for your research essay, and we'll resume our lecture next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.